welcome everyone. I'm David from the Admissions Advisor team. Very excited to see everyone here today. So thank you very much for joining. We do these Q&A sessions a few days before every application deadline. Really is an opportunity to hear directly from our alumni about their experience in the program. We are very different from both the traditional campus model and the online model. So really, this is a great chance for everyone to ask questions and hear about our program firsthand. I've got Molly here helping out. She's going to be in the chat with me answering questions, and Grace, we've got, will be running the session. Grace works with various teams on the program operations side, as well as kind of managing the day-to-day functions of the school on Slack. And she also helps design events and initiatives, kind of elevate the student experience. So you'll meet her a lot as you come through the program. Just before I hand it over, though, I just want to kind of run through a few quick reminders. We have a large crowd here today, so please do stay on mute. Use the chat functions if you have questions. If you have questions for specific alumni, Rob or Christopher, you can @ them and we can forward on those messages to Grace as we go through the conversation. Just again, a reminder, today is about the alumni and their experience. So if you have more specific questions about the admissions process or about the program operation side of things, please feel free to ask Molly or myself, or schedule an appointment later and we can answer individual questions. But again, today is about the alumni and their experience, and we'll do our best to answer all your questions. We are recording this event, so if you have to jet off early, you will get a recording of it over email later. And that is it. I will pass it over to Grace. Thank you so much, everyone. And Grace, over to you.
All right. Thank you, David. So hello from New Jersey on the East Coast of the US. So I saw Connecticut and New York in there. So those of us in this area, Philadelphia, we've got snow, and it's like the pretty kind, at least from street level up. If you just don't look at the street, it's probably lovely to see all of you. And thank you so much for taking time out of your mornings, afternoons, and late nights. I know we have some people here who are calling in quite deep into their evening, and it is I don't take it lightly, or I think it's a small thing when someone takes time out of their day to attend a virtual session. So we hope and plan for this session to be worth your while as we start to have discussions with two of our many alumni, graduates of our program. Myself, I've been working here for about 4 years now. I started off in admissions, and now I'm deep in the world of student virtual spaces. I am in many Slack spaces, and I work with cohorts. I onboard cohorts, I graduate them, and everything in between. So for those of you who have applied and who are about to, or who are just eagerly waiting, hopefully, I know I'll see some of you as you start the program later on. So one of the great things about my role is that I get to interact with so many students, and then of course they eventually become alumni and graduates. And the two that we have here today, Christopher and Robert, or Rob, I've watched over them when they were in their programs, and of course I've had some really great interactions with them as well. The world we are now is our relationships are built oftentimes on a virtual platform, and maybe if we're lucky we get to meet them in person. But I love students, and especially love getting the stories of each of their journeys, and both career, personal, and learning. So that's what we're going to do today. As you listen into our conversation and you meet Christopher and Rob, no doubt each of you must have a million questions in your mind. You have variables that you're trying to work out. Is this the right time? Is this the right program? Is this the right financial decision? Is this good for my career? So whatever those questions happen to be, we want to first of all say that we 100% acknowledge them. You are wondering and you are curious. And then so as you listen to Rob and Christopher and myself have a conversation, my hope is that at some point, something will resonate with you. You might hear something that feels like, oh, that's me. Or you might hear something that you hadn't even considered. So that is the goal in my eyes. By the end of this session, you'll walk away having heard something that really will be meaningful for you. So now without further ado, we'll have a chat with both of them, and they actually both graduated fairly recently over the last few months. So their experiences and the program should be pretty fresh in their minds. Let's see. First up, we're going to meet Christopher. True story, I never check the slide before we start. So I'm always curious who's first up. All right, so Christopher graduated very recently. And I actually did ask him to speak to his own cohort when we did the graduation celebrations, which are done virtually as well. I have to plug something. Christopher he's awesome. He sent me a book afterwards, and you may not hear all of it, but he's such a traveler. He is a world traveler and has just been everywhere. And this one is called North Asia through the lens, and it's beautiful. So if anyone's really loves Asia or travel, especially through Asian countries, then Christopher would be your person to go to. So Christopher, I'm going to stop talking and pass the mic over to you so you can introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you, Grace, and thank you for appreciating the book. I am a world traveler. I got into international business development 25 years ago, and I've done multiple product launches in Asia and Europe, and I've managed partnerships here in the US. The reason that I decided to join Quantic is it goes a long way back, but I used to work for Mozilla, which is the company that makes Firefox, the open source web browser. And I worked for them for 8 years, launching their new products, their new hardware products, their first phone in Brazil. And at one point, I realized I was going to stay with Mozilla for a long time. So I asked my boss if she would sponsor my MBA. And when she found out how much it costs, she said, there's no way we can do that. So I put my plans on the back burner. And then, of course, the whole saying from John Lennon, life is what happens when you're planning other things. Along came the pandemic. And we saw a very interesting thing happen in the US. Our government laid out a very strong stimulus program, which created very high inflation, and interest rates started to climb as the Federal Reserve tried to keep the economy's growth in check, keep it from overheating. Now, this did a very bad thing for startups in Silicon Valley. A lot of startups that depended on debt financing could no longer get new debt or could not issue new debt at that time. And so I decided, after trying to help my startup raise capital to survive, we came very close to winning an investment from LG. And ultimately, they went with another company. And so I told the CEO that I was going to move on and do some other projects. So I've been working with several companies as a contractor. And I've been working on emerging technologies recently. And everyone has heard about AI, VR, and AR, which are the trend in the Silicon Valley area. So I'm currently focusing on emerging products like functional near-infrared sensing that will go into VR headsets that will allow you to see if your meditation is improving your blood flow to the cranium over a session of, let's say, 6 months. So really weird stuff. We don't know if it's going to have product market fit. But when I launched my company, I realized there were certain things that were missing from my own experience. And when I learned that Quantic could give me the accounting, finance, marketing, statistics, and probability, I jumped right in. I love that Quantic opened up the curriculum to us so we could get a feel for how the platform works. I completed every course that was open, and then I decided I'm going to be part of this next cohort. And so I applied and I made my payment, and I've been absolutely delighted with the program. I've made some incredible friends, and it has furthered my project of applying emerging technology in healthcare. And I can bore you with the details about that later.
I love it. All right. So thank you. Thank you for giving a really lovely snapshot of your career journey and what's led you to this point. So on a question about just transition in general, transition, whether that's out of necessity or for choice. And I'm just thinking about in general, the audience, you're all here, you're all career minded, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be looking at a business program. And Christopher, what wisdom from your experience and just from all the paths you've tread, what uh, how does one get over the fear or hesitation of making transitions in their career? I'm speaking more broadly, but if you have any wisdom in that department, I think it would be nice to hear.
Very good. It's always good to keep in mind that in my field specifically, the technology that you will be working on in the near future does not exist right now. And so when I went to college, we thought about set your course, plan your path, find an employer who's going to help you achieve that goal, stay the course. And the industry today is not like that. And so what we have to do is be ready for our company to make radical shifts. Layoffs are, de rigueur these days. And so you have to be ready for anything. And don't take it personally when suddenly you get your 2 weeks notice because the company can't afford to keep you on the team. And the way I frame it in my psyche is they can't invest right now in the talents I want to apply to them. So don't take it personally if you go through layoffs. Everyone in Silicon Valley, you've probably heard, has been laid off in the past 3 years. And so just say, what was I after when I was going into this specific role? Has that changed? And what do I want to be going after when I find a sponsor for that next great challenge? And see how companies participate in your life rather than looking at it from how you participate in their mission.
Excellent. I knew you'd have a fantastic response for that. So important, especially as all of you are considering adding this business education to your toolkit and how that's going to work into your career journey. Thank you, Christopher. All right, Rob, your turn is next. Rob, I did get to meet in person. I did. And it was so much fun. And Rob, I have to share with you, when you were in the cohort, I remember you very well. And I do have so many students I interact with, and virtually it's actually difficult for people to stay in your mind because there's so many. But Rob has always been so curious from day one and always asked the right questions about getting clarification, whether it's on assignments or whatnot. And I've always appreciated, and I still appreciate his just being really down to earth all the time. And so that was how I remember you, Rob. You'd ask me a lot of questions in the beginning of the cohort, which was the right thing to do. It was very good. But over to you now so you can introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, hey, thanks for that intro. Yeah, you hit on something really interesting there, actually. I mean, asking all these questions goes back to me actually having looked at business schools for a very long time and never made the, let's say, the decision to actually do it. While I was thinking about it, according to the list here, that's actually correct. I moved from Amsterdam, London, Paris, Tel Aviv, Los Angeles, and back to New York. That's true. And somewhere along that ride, there was first Smartly, which became Quantic later. So I knew about that. By the time I moved back to New York, I had done a lot of contracting work, especially. You need to understand that the market in Europe is quite different, right? There's no fire at will culture. So if you're good at what you do in Europe, you contract. You don't take a permanent position, basically. The reason is you get paid double, roughly. That's roughly how it is. That backfires when you go to the United States because they look at your resume and they go like, why did you spend only 2-3 years at a certain company that we've never heard of? So it became kind of harder for me to establish myself in that sense. And yes, I had a background in engineering, in design as well, actually. But I really wanted to be in product management. I always wanted to do product because I like to work with design people. I like the creativity. I have a proper computer science background from back in the Netherlands where, I could just do that, but I didn't really love it. So I tried to combine these two things, and then you kind of end up in the world of product management, right? But I completely lacked any business skills. I tried a bunch of startups, and I had the right idea, actually. I did a food delivery before Deliveroo in the UK took off, actually. In hindsight, I know what I didn't do right. If only I had a business school degree already by then. I I did something very akin to YouTube actually at Amsterdam local TV, where we were like, hey, why don't you upload videos to TV? And then we expose it on the internet. And again, the same issue happened, was like, how do you even fund things and how do you navigate it? So I had no business chops whatsoever, right? So anyway, back in New York, I finally decided to make the jump. And so for me, I had like 3 options, right? Either I go with Sloan Business School, either someone that I used to work with back in the UK that was gonna forward me, is like, look, I'll talk you in, but it's also gonna be $200,000, just so that you know. And it's like, you know what? I'll never make it back. That's not an option, really. So then there's 2 other options. Either I go local because I really want to meet people out, with the pandemic. And so then you get, in my budget, actually only the Baruch School of Business here. But who outside of New York has heard of Baruch? No one. So it's great for the people in New York. But since, look at my background, once I'm back in Amsterdam or London, they go like, mate, what kind of school is that? We've never heard of it. So then actually, Quantic makes a lot of sense if you think about it, right? Like I spoke a lot with friends here at Bloomberg in the finance industry, Morgan Stanley. And they're like, well, think about it. That's a growing brand, right? And you can do it at your own time. It's affordable. You can pay out of pocket if your company doesn't want to sponsor. So you don't create any sort of overlap there between your, let's say, who actually paid for it, whose education is it? It's truly yours, right? So yeah, for me, Quantic really came sort of to the top quickly there. And yeah, it was one of these conversations that we do right now. 2 years ago, I was in a similar chat like all of you, and I was listening to like people before me. And that for me really helped, which is why I'm glad that Grace asked me to chat about it here. And I'm glad I finished it. I feel, oh yeah, one more thing I'll say about it. I really feel I learned a new language. So in addition to Dutch, English, and a few, broken French, I speak business finally. And that really, that really makes a difference. We had layoffs again, actually yesterday. I'm one of the few that got a promotion instead of a layoff. So that's really interesting. They definitely are aware I finished a business degree. Did it help? Well, it didn't hurt, for sure. So that's all I can say right now about that. But I felt way more grounded. It's like, well, what are you gonna do? Like lay me off? I mean, yeah, I'll find something else. That gives you a certain, in addition to engineering and all that stuff that I've done, definitely I feel more secure. So, yeah.
Excellent. You do speak another language, and you speak many already, so I love that. All right, so thank you for sharing that. And I actually just listening to, of course, both of you, and by the way, Rob and Christopher don't know each other. They've never been in one conversation together. So every time we do one of these panels, more often than not, we're bringing on alumni who have not crossed paths necessarily directly. So this conversation we're creating on the spot is very much literally on the spot. And there are always differences and similarities and threads through these. So something that I feel is true of both of you is, and many of our students, is that you care deeply about, obviously, your work, your profession, your career, and the quality of learning is important to you. And for it to be the right kind of learning and for the right price, like all those boxes are really important. You've both done your research over time about which one should be a good fit. And by the way, I would say it's true. Not every program, it's not a one size fits all. I don't think any program is. So for both Rob and Christopher to understand where they were in their career and the reality of the world and the markets, I think all of those have factored in from my point of view when I listen to both of you. So I think from what you both have said, the coming to Quantic felt like both very practical, and the timing in the pandemic and other options were not really feasible or didn't really make sense to do. Keeping that thought in mind, I was actually looking at some statistics, and I won't show them, but one of the I have this really great graphic from Statista. By the way, one of the best resources and databases that you have access to as a student. Most common reasons for people choosing online versus on-campus learning options. This is 2023. And what the top 2 reasons why people may choose an online option versus a traditional in-person would be existing commitments, like work and family just don't allow the attendance, in person. And the second one after that would be that online learning was the only way to pursue my field of interest or whatever it is you need to get done. So my question to you, Christopher and Rob, also is now looking back, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong, maybe the choice to pursue Quantic versus other options made a lot of sense at the time. It was a very practical decision, timing wise, finances, all of that. And then now having completed it and obviously going through the entire experience, has your perception of online learning changed at all through the experience of Quantic? Why don't we start with Christopher?
Well, for me, the choice is very simple because I already commuted 2 hours a day for my job, and going to Haas School of Business would have added another hour and a half across the bay. So it was unrealistic for me to be able to get to the campus and still have a family life at home. I had researched online, and one very important thing is I wanted an international program. And with Quantic, I was able to study with people from Europe, Africa, Caribbean, Thailand, Australia. It was very broad. And so I think that clinched it for me is I wanted to have an international venue because my career is international. Everything made sense. And the interesting thing, and I think you will find this if you take the courses that are open to you now, you get much more out of it than you intended. Like I had no intention of learning all the ins and outs of how blockchain works. I did not have a need for that in the business or sector of AI. And yet, completing the module on that, I found it fascinating. And so I knew that Pedago is also responsible for Rosetta Stone, and I'm a language learner as well. And I like that kind of episodic style of learning that I can control at my own pace. And by the way, my pace is incredibly fast. So I was about 2 to 3 months ahead of my entire cohort because I just really enjoyed the way it was presented. So I take well to online learning where I don't have to sit in a lecture and wait for everybody else to answer the same question at the same time. So that's what I appreciate about online. And also the flexibility of schedule was fantastic.
All right, 2 to 3 months. Wow. All right. Well, you were the student who wanted to take those exams earlier than everybody else, probably.
Right.
But you know what? It works. It really does. And this is what's so great about the Quantic model. Again, it's not a one size fits all, but it fits many, many different styles and lifestyles and pacings and all of that. So very powerful. All right. Same question to you, Rob. Now looking back, having, everything that led up to your decision and choice to join Quantic and this kind of learning environment, and then now looking back in hindsight, has your perception changed at all regarding online learning?
It has, yeah, definitely. I do remember I was very hesitant on this one. Like to me, I'm someone who sort of, also at work, I just get the best energy out of meeting people and working together and whatnot, right? That said, so like I said, I was very sort of the reason for me to go to possibly to Baruch here in Brooklyn was the sort of on-campus in-person experience. Mind you, it was 10 times more expensive than Quantic. That was another factor. But that was not the main one, actually, to be honest with you, because I was sort of thinking that might be worth it for me. But to answer your question in hindsight, what I found is that, well, actually, these guys are going through a pandemic, right? They are doing online stuff. So what exactly am I getting out of that right now? And so when I compare it back to my experience with and names like Dr. Salul popped to mind, like the one thing I dreaded the most was finance and bookkeeping and accountancy. It's like, oh my God. But this guy, honestly, I'm sorry, the professor, I should say, really, he made it so personal and he was so into it that actually that felt like I was in person. So also the side chats that we had with like random students, we sort of zoomed in on and said, hey, that's interesting how you approach that. And I had it completely wrong. So these sort of, yes, they're virtual, but when you say online, it's not like a one-way thing where you just sort of don't interact. It's like this kind of situation, right? You talk to people. So, and then that being able to do from both Europe, visiting family, while upstate New York or here at home in Brooklyn, I think you can't really beat that. And the other thing I would say is that it's not just online learning, it's also the format. I think it's called active learning, TM copyright, right? The format in which Quantic does that. It's all this like micro burst of information that you go through. So I found myself sitting on the subway and I'm like, okay, well, I got, 30 minutes to go. I'll just redo Blue Ocean. I really love the Blue Ocean strategy thinking. Like, oh, that's amazing. You just redo it or learn more. That's 30 minutes I would have wasted normally on cat videos, I guess. And that happens a lot. So I think that, when you ingest a lot of information like the night before and then the day after, you just go over it again and you zoom in on the bits that you were interested in all those off moments, active learning style, that is really, let's put it this way. I was surprised how effective the information was being conveyed into my brain. That really worked for me.
Really great features of the online learning possibilities, I guess you could say. Unless someone or we have gone through multiple or even one other online learning program, each one is still quite different. The combination of resources, the app, the potential engagement, and hopefully all of you in the audience are hearing from both Christopher and Rob is that there's a lot that can be going on within an online program. It's not just logging in. It's not just turning your computer on. And there's, from what I've seen, having just witnessing a lot of students and watching programs being lived out, is there's a lot of creativity to it too. There's a lot of possible ways of doing it the way it suits your style, it suits your timing, doing certain things offline, all that possibility. What I love about what both of you have talked about and will actually maybe a question for you is the engagement piece with your peers. And you are both incredibly global people, which I really love. Maybe the question I want to ask now is, in your interactions, whether it was through your capstone project or teamwork or just your own radar for globalness, what are some of the takeaways that you or fruits that have come from your experience with not just the learning part, but even just the Quantic community? And actually, why don't we go to Christopher? What are some of the awesome things that you've experienced in the Quantic community?
Okay. Well, one thing is I'm a networker, and Silicon Valley, everyone will talk to you. Everyone is interested in hearing your perspective on what they're doing. And what I enjoyed about Quantic is as soon as I joined, I was able to reach out to a broad array of people. And because I do medicine and VR, and that was my specific interest, I was able to zero in on people who are already doing that, who are part of the Quantic community, and ask them, have you had any experience with launching, let's say, MetaQuest in a clinic? And I would get very quick responses. And some of the people who were in my cohort had a vision for a capstone project that was VR in healthcare. And I was able to, ahead of time, again, 3 months ahead of time, find the people who I thought might have the explicit interest in seeing this healthcare sector elevated through a project that we would work on together. And frankly, I told everyone I'm a very fast-moving person, and you're probably not going to like working with me because I a very aggressive schedule. With that said, I would love to have your talent as part of my team. Would you be interested? And fortunately, I was able to intimidate some of the people so quickly that they said, definitely not signing up for something that's faster than the coursework. But I ended up finding a really great group that was committed to medicine or committed to marketing and had an interest in VR or healthcare. And we ended up having a really good time on the capstone. And we took it outside of the bounds of just what is the minimum viable work that you need to do for this. And we engaged very heavily with industry, bringing in a lot of existing experts in the field to advise our team. So like we created our own little course where we were bringing in speakers, and it was one of the most fulfilling parts of this. I was daunted at first. The capstone looked like a huge project to create a company from scratch. And it was one of the most delightful parts of it because of the network and the ability to reach out to people in the Quantic network.
And I saw you had a name for your team, right? The Magnificent, is that right? Magnificent
I
Seven,
call
is
them
that right?
the Magnificent Seven, which comes from the Seven Samurai, a Japanese film about a village that's going to be attacked by a bunch of bandits, and one very weak samurai goes around and finds a bunch of very strong samurai and ends up saving. So that's where that reference comes from.
That's a great story. It's thank you for sharing that story. There's something very, it doesn't seem like much on the surface, but it's so powerful to have access to quick access to other professionals, people in different industries, people who are, and then finding your tribe, I guess, within the community. And it sounds like that's what you really did, Christopher. You were very proactive and you started to seek out people that maybe you didn't realize existed, and then maybe even surprised yourself in how many people would be thinking similarly as you as far as idea and drive. So and we have, I think, in our alumni and student community, something like 20,000 people at this point. So guaranteed, every single person here probably can find someone in your tribe or thinking similarly to you as well. Thanks so much, Christopher. All right, so over to you, Rob. Reflect a little bit on also your interaction and engagement with the Quantic community, and just give people a sense of how that's been a benefit to you.
Right. Where to even start with that? I think, you know what, something that was always on the back of my mind is that when I just returned back to the UK back in the days, like I had a manager who was like, he said something along the lines of, it's like, hey man, it's all about how you got to make it interesting for yourself. If things are not interesting, then you do it, right? And that sort of stuck with me all the time. And actually, also at Quantic, I was like, well, I don't know what it is going really from the get-go. It seems an online program, right? But I'll make the best of it, really. Also, I'm in New York City, so I know a lot of people just come this way, whether you like it or not. It's going to be a focal point, right? So that I'm a bit biased in that sense because I knew I would be meeting people, but also I sort of took advantage of it in the sense that so I met you, you know, all the events that were happening, I just showed up and it's like, let's get in all the groups and just meet people. So that, and I did it on purpose because I was like, I was curious to see like who else is there and in the similar, not same position as me, but also something that Chris just mentioned. The capstone was actually really interesting, and also it's kind of you nearing the end, right? And I felt this might be one of the very few times where I could do something different on digital, sports, media. Why not go green or, you know, do some, or even non-profit? Like I really thought about it. It's like, this is that one chance where I could sort of like go sideways in a safe space, basically. So I actually ended up doing something around furniture because here in Brooklyn, you got all these artisan shops where they build, you know, crafts and they sell it for good money and it looks beautiful. I was like, why don't I do something like that? And I found a group from Italian, Israeli, me, and Colombia. So I ended up going to Colombia actually to meet Lena and talk about numbers and whatnot. Turns out her partner had a great microbrewery, so that didn't hurt. And this being New York, obviously she had to be for work at some point here as well. So we could combine things. So that, you know, the sort of non-online or virtualness, you can kind of mitigate it. I mean, obviously it's an online program. So as far as you can get the best bits of both worlds, I would say Quantic definitely does that. But you have to do it yourself. It's not, no, you have to sort of work for it. And
Yeah.
I just saw someone in the chat saying Turkey. I was in Istanbul for family reasons, basically, actually. even though they're not from Turkey. But I just went online. It's like, well, who from Quantic is in Istanbul? And I ended up getting 2 tickets for I think it was Fenerbahce, the
Oh.
main team there. And that's because of all the regulations. As a sort of visitor, you typically don't get to the soccer game there, football. So yeah, there's not a sort of unexpected Quantic network effect where I managed to sort of just reach out and have a coffee and So yeah, again, it's if you're interested in putting a bit of work in, I found that the network responds, and also off network. So we reached out to a very successful San Francisco furniture company that was like the latest in CNC machinery and whatnot. And these guys are delighted that we reached out. The CEO freed time up. It's like, oh, you're students from this business school? Of course. He showed us all the magic that happens. And that's, even how the patterns were sort of defined and whatnot. Guess stuff we were not supposed to see anyway, but we were students. So yeah, very positive. But again, you have to sort of, if you just sit back and sort of think it's going to come to you, that won't happen, I believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you reach out, I feel that the network responds back to you, definitely.
That's a great way of putting it. The network does respond, and the network effect of Quantic community. So that really captures it. I'm writing that down. That's a good quote. The network does respond. Okay, so we have a couple questions in the comment box, and I think that these are questions I had in mind as well. And let's kind of form it in a way that will be good for you to answer. So there are people, and maybe both of you at some point back in the early phases of applying to the program, you were thinking similarly. But one question here is, how do employers respond to your degree? Let's say if they see it on your resume, CV, or even just hear you talk about it. And then just, it's the general sense of the reputation of and credibility of Quantic as an educational organization. Probably in comparison, I think a lot of us will compare it naturally in our minds to more established brands or even a traditional school. So let's start with Christopher. What are your thoughts on how Quantic might be perceived, either by someone like a friend asking or from an employer point of view? How would you respond to that?
Okay. So at Akin AI, I told the CEO I was going to be moving on to different projects. I actually had another project I wanted to do that was kind of a stealth VR initiative, and I wanted to make a transition. And he said, "Oh wow, which school are you going to?" And I said, "Quantic."
Yeah.
And he said, "Quantic? They're really stirring things up, aren't they?" I was like, "You know about them in Australia." I was very impressed that he knew. And the founder of the company said, "Oh, I did my MBA in London, and after I was done, I just threw it away. It didn't have any impact on his business as an engineer." But I love that the CEO had that reaction. Another colleague of mine works at Meta, and he was very surprised. He's like, "Oh, wow, this is really interesting. And how does it compare to the other schools?" And I said, "Well, look, man, after a pandemic, I do not want to sit in a room of 120 students asking questions one by one to a professor. Like what I'd seen in my tour of the business school over here, I just realized I did not want to go through that." And then they said, "So how does it work?" And I said, "Well, Rosetta Stone, it presents the information episodically. So if you're a fast learner, you can go fast. If you want to reiterate something, you can go back and repeat the course." And so the credibility of Pedago itself helped people understand that this is something far greater in scale than, let's say, University of Phoenix. So, and then the other thing is, I don't really care what people think. I did this for my own reasons. And now I know when I apply to jobs and they say MBA preferred, that's fine. Okay, I have it. But I'm not trying to impress people with, sorry to say it this way, paying for somebody's real estate. And like the MBA is about the education and nothing but the education. So that's what I'm focusing on. And yes, it's newly established, but also the Quantic team has helped share some stats that allows you to show that Quantic has more exposure and more alumni in Silicon Valley than most large, good reputation universities. And then one other thing is I know a colleague of mine at Mozilla paid something like $3,000 to get one certificate in an online Harvard program so that she could wedge it into her LinkedIn and then get a raise. Now, that's a really great strategy, but it's a very expensive strategy because I'm not sure that the raise she got offset the cost of getting that one certificate. And because Quantic opens up the entire curriculum of early, let's say, freemium style teaser courses for every single specialization, you can go in and complete Blue Ocean Strategy and put it right on your resume if you want to, and ask your boss, well, I just completed this program at Quantic. And she's going to say, wait a second, you're not going to leave me, are you? And you're like, no, Quantic doesn't require me to resign my job. I can still support you and take care of my own education, whether or not you sponsor my full degree. Hint, hint. So put them on your LinkedIn. And when people ask you, why are you doing this? Just say, I'm interested in learning, and I will pursue that by hook or by crook. And Quantic is a good way to do it. And it is true. Every company in Silicon Valley has a Quantic alum, and I'm pinging them and saying, hey, what do you think about this new product your company's launching? Would you introduce me to your marketing team because their accessibility issues for blind people is horrible? And they're like, oh yeah, sure, we have to get on that. And that is very Silicon Valley, of course, this openness and permeability. And Quantic has just fit that need because there are a lot of companies who have pesky people like me asking them to sponsor their MBAs, and no one wants to pay for Wharton or Haas. So Quantic has come along at the pandemic. It has given an affordable option for my boss to pay for it if she wanted to. And it gave me the capability to do it whether or not my boss approved.
You just covered a lot of ground. We are taking notes there. It's so much more than the simple question that a lot of people will start asking in the beginning, which is, so how is it? How is it? Well, there's so much there. And one thing that you mentioned that's very important is, and this is for all of you listening, you have to know what you want. You have to know what's really important to you right now, what makes sense for you in your career, what is your career needing from you, and what you need to do. Is it to wedge something into your LinkedIn, or is it to make transitions? And so each of you must have those questions in your mind. All right, now, Rob, same question, same general discussion of how to, and maybe you have had to respond to people, maybe people have asked you, but in general, what comments or insights do you have on people looking in on Quantic and wondering and having certain perceptions of Quantic compared to other institutions?
That's an interesting one. But like I said, Chris mentioned a lot of stuff that I could repeat. I think 9 out of 10 think I'm like, yep, that makes sense. The one difference I would say between us is that I'm much slower. I take things very chill, but also I know, I get off at a great speed and I slow down, and the way for me to finish things is to simply, go with the program, just follow it. So that's something I was like, oh my God, if I'm on my own, would I still do that, right? Because it's a lot. But I think Quantic did a beautiful job, and again, also the people around you are in the same boat anyway. It really helped to stay with the program. So that's one thing that popped in my mind. Listening to Chris, like that was a bit different. Where I was definitely not ahead. Maybe in a few things that I really like, but in general, it's just exactly with the program, right? And then to your question on the other schools you meant, well, I do remember I had a Quantic shirt on and I forgot about it, and I was on a Zoom call, and I got actually workmates reaching out saying like, hey, I've been interested. I saw you got that Quantic thing. Like really just a red cue that was enough for you guys to sort of spot that. So yeah, people know it. Another, like I think I mentioned earlier, my contacts that say Bloomberg and whatnot. There was one person who said, I think he did the Cars Business School in London as well. We both came out of the UK to New York. And I said, yeah, I don't know about that. It's like, they're still so local. He's like, oh man, if I had to do it over again, I would go with Quantic, these days. So not to say Cars is not a good school. It is a good school. It's just that Quantic has that sort of universal, I can't think of any other brand that does the same thing. Like that's at the same time global, but also accessible. Like everyone knows like, the big names, but if you're not there, how do you even do that? How do you engage with that institution, right? Other than going virtual. And I also do remember one case where just over a drink, I think we talked about business schools and mentioned Quantic. And at some point, someone was like, "Hey, are you with the marketing department of Quantic or something?" It's like, no, honestly, I'm not being paid for this, right? And like, sure. And it's like, nah, I'm just very sort of engaged, and I really, I just think it's a great deal. I'm very happy I did it. I think it's the only option for me, realistically, that I was gonna do, having looked at all the other options. Was it 20 years younger, maybe right out of school? Things are different, but in this, for executive MBA, I think this is just the best option I could think of, honestly. And yeah, I am sensitive to brand, to be honest with you. Is it a LinkedIn checkbox exercise? Well, to a point, because I could tell people here I work at the BBC in the Bundesliga, and they just stare at me like, what's that? That's not a US household name. Sirius is, so that helps now. But, if I then have to communicate my sort of business chops, I like something that people know about. That is less important than, like Chris also said, like just for myself, I need that knowledge, right, to fill the knowledge gaps. But obviously I was going to look at like, how does that, does that ring a bell when I mention it? So yeah, it was important. Even though the second most important thing, not the first one.
I very much appreciate, and we want our alumni to be honest and to be transparent about what's real for many of us, that we're humans, we're brand sensitive. We do think about how we're going to, what we're doing, and how the world's going to perceive us as individuals, how the world perceives us as an institution, but then also to be sure we have that conversation about what's important. Learning is paramount. Quality of learning is paramount. Can it fit into my life right now? Does it make sense for me? And the times are changing. Times are 100% changing. Maybe the pandemic was a bit of a huge catalyst, throwing us, forward very quickly into, okay, we can't do things the way we used to. So those are all things I think that are probably top of mind for all of you as well, just like it has been for the last several years for all the students who have come through our program. Just two more pretty easy questions for both of you. First one is, practically speaking, what did a week in the life of your studies, integrated with everything else you have going on in life, work, business, personal, those are all the realities that every single person here is also dealing with. So what was your way of studying? And we do have a huge range of everyone studying in different ways. So why don't we start with Christopher? What was your, like, a week in the life for you?
So I knew that my stealth project in VR was going to take a lot of time. And I knew this year, 2024, was going to be a very big year. So I front loaded a lot of my work, finished specializations in the winter leading up to this year. And I'm a visual learner, so I would pair my MacBook Air with a Samsung TV over AirPlay, and I would read everything carefully. I would take pictures of questions for when the exam came up. I would follow every outbound link and save the articles with Firefox screenshots. So if I wanted to go back and reread those later, I could do that. So I just hoarded all the information meticulously and carefully in a very focused way. And then I would get up very early on Saturday with a cup of coffee and sit down and take the exam, and just trying to keep as much focus on the course material as possible. I did not want to have other distractions, and I also did not want Quantic to steal my time from my other business. So being able to allocate time and not have to fit my company's schedule with a school schedule really worked for me. And over the winter break, I just did as many courses as I could to try to get ahead, knowing that 2024 is going to be so intense.
Yeah. So a lot of discipline ahead of time and knowing where to fit all the, like Tetris, right? Making sure you fit the right pieces there. And I don't remember how I did the EMBA program as well. I think I tried to stay on pace. Maybe similar to Rob as well. I did my best to stay on schedule, and I think I usually did one course during the week and one on the weekend. We pace it out, so that's roughly 2 courses a week, and that's our schedule is very much set up so that it's the marathon. It's the marathon, and so if you do it at pace, then you will finish without a tremendous amount of stress. Rob, how about you? What was your style of consumption and processing the information, and maybe even just how you balanced it in your week schedule?
Yeah, interesting. I guess I'm by nature a bit less disciplined than say Chris. Even though I have my moments, I really enjoy something. I guess it's just total ADHD, isn't it? And then there's these moments where I just have to sort of stay on track. But also, I know that that's how I operate. And without delving into too much specifics, I came from a terrible situation that was not great, that had nothing to do with Quantic. But actually, sort of getting back on track with life and sort of, you know, just sort of, getting back to a normal rhythm. Actually, Quantic helped, I think, because it gave me also a reason to, the exam is going to happen, and I know I don't want to have a backlog of stuff to fill in over the summer. So when I felt ready, actually, I applied and I luckily got in. But as I mentioned earlier, this was on my mind for a long time, right? So it's almost like therapeutic for me. It's like, it gave me something real to do with a real goal. Um, and yeah, I guess during the difficult moments, everyone is out, it's summer, and I still have something on finance to do. That's boring. But also, actually, it gets more interesting over time. And I just kept reminding myself, it's like, it's only like 10 hours this week. That's not too much. It could be 15, who knows? But get up on a Saturday morning, or occasionally stay up to 3 in the morning, whatever. As long as you do it, it's doable. That's just how I operate. I would not necessarily advise everyone to do it that way, but it did work for me. Yeah, I hope that sort of creates a clear picture. I think you need a bit of brain space to feel ready for that. At least I did. But once you do it, it kind of guides itself to a point. Like, it's interesting. It's engaging. I like, even the stuff I thought I didn't like the fact that I understand finance, well, kind of much better than everyone around me. That's just mind blowing, because that's one of those things that's like, what? I get that kind of stuff now. So Chris talked about financing his company in his intro, and I was like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I'm like, the different ways to finance the company. I didn't know anything about it like 2 years ago. I had no idea.
Yeah.
That
This is important, actually, and I'm really glad that we have. There are very much of an array of learners, and I've spoken to so many of them, and it's something you mentioned, Rob, that I think is actually I've heard many times too, but maybe not the exact words, which is the learning in the program. I mean, let's face it, there are like a lot of things going on for every one of us, and sometimes very stressful things or just big changes. And I've seen students write to me. Quantic has been a really nice and productive distraction. It's something that I know is there, and I need to do it, and I do it, and it's obviously the learning is there, of course, but it becomes a part of people's lives for a time that has these really wonderful positive effects, that it's not even just about the degree. It's about something that is ongoing, that is active, and that moves you forward. And when you cross that finish line and look back, you're like, oh my goodness, I just did that. I just did that. Whether you apply it to a future business, or it just gives you the language that Rob was talking about, everyone comes out finishing a better version of themselves, and the experience also happens to be, for different people, really positive in different ways. And I think that's a really beautiful aspect to the program. Really quick fire wisdom advice, asking both of you if you can share a last nugget of wisdom with the audience members as they are continuing to process this decision. We'll start with Rob. Do you have one thing you can share with everyone in the audience as they're considering and looking into pursuing the degree?
In hindsight, knowing what I know now, I would say if you're thinking about it and you get in, just do it. Just go with it. Don't think about it too much. You know, that's it. Just go with it. Just
Just go with
jump
it.
in. Yeah, you
Jump
won't
in,
regret it.
dive in.
Absolutely not.
All right, and over to you, Christopher. Any nuggets that you want to leave with the audience?
Okay. One, I think, interesting thing, I think someone was asking about how the cohort system works. Even though we worked on specializations in advance at our leisure, we all needed to work together to pace the same projects in a peer support kind of way. And I want you to brace yourself. If you decide to take the Quantic courses in advance of applying, make sure it fits your style of learning and you enjoy the process, the kind of dopamine rush of completing a module and all that stuff. And some of my cohort could not keep pace with the schedule and asked the admissions team to slip them by a certain period of time to a different cohort, or something comes up and they needed to delay, and Quantic was flexible to help them do that. And so we stay in touch with them, but they're just outside of our study group. And finally, the money back guarantee that you can start it, and if it's not for you, you can back out, is wonderful. Because, and I don't know if this is intended, but I found the very beginning accounting part so difficult for people who were not familiar with it. And my cohort all reached out together. We had a Discord group and a Facebook group. We asked questions of each other, and we got each other through it. And after accounting, I felt like classes got easier and easier. So if you pay for it and you get through accounting and you're like, okay, just breathe a sigh of relief. And, Dr. Carr told us this is not a logical system. This is a kind of jujitsu that you use. And tried and true method, we need to understand the way that it works. But a lot of people just really had a hard time with accounting, and I knew that was going to be hard. And I could have gone further into the course load and decided whether I could still keep pace and back out if I didn't want to. So that flexibility they give you is really valuable. So try it on and see if it fits. And know that if you want to get through the first quarter, let's say, and then determine whether you think you can stick it out, there's flexibility on that side too.
Great advice. Trust the process and trust yourself. And it is a bit of a marathon. So usually in marathon, I don't know if any of you run, the first mile or two isn't so hot. So all right, we are done for now, and we're a little bit over time. So let me pass the thank you, Christopher and Rob, so much. I'm going to pass the mic back over to David.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, guys. Sorry, I was on mute. Just quickly before we finish up, just want to say thank you everyone so much for coming. Thank you for all your questions and for your attention and being willing to find out more about us. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Rob, so much. We really appreciate your time. Thank you, Grace, for hosting, and Molly for helping out. Just very quick reminders, February 15th is the upcoming deadline in a couple of days. If you haven't already, please download the app and try the Business Foundations courses. We reference them quite a lot. It'll really add context into the whole program and how we operate. June 3rd is the next starting session. If we didn't get to your questions today, please contact our team. We can answer questions going forward. If you have anything about the program, we do one-on-one sessions, daily Zoom sessions, or call or WhatsApp on the number on the website, quantic.edu/contact. Just finishing up, thank you so much again today, everyone. We really appreciate everyone attending. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Stay safe. Cheers, everyone. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone. Bye.